Welcome to part 1 of the battle plan, to belong. Just a reminder that the battle plan is mission implementation, and where the spiritual war is essentially won or lost. There are 3 parts or B's to Call to Conquer's battle plan: to belong, to build, and to battle. And all 3 are critically and equally important in achieving the mission. If you missed the previous video on commission, please be sure to watch that before watching this. But for those of you who didn't, let's dive in. Maturing spiritually involves having both the spiritual life and spiritual skills of a disciple. That is what it means to be a mature and equipped follower of Christ, culminating in Jesus' commandment to disciple the nations. Accordingly, the core business and associated fruits of a mature Christian faith must involve the being and making of disciples. But what does this actually mean and look like? To answer this question, to belong must be broken down into its 3 core elements, being the model, the structure, and the practice. If no man is an island, why would we think that a spiritual man can stand alone? In fact, when we understand that as spiritual men we are constantly at war, the thought of fighting alone is incomprehensible. Any soldier will tell you that one of the keys to a successful mission is strategy, and a huge part of strategy is formation. That is, how best to organize oneself in response to one's enemy and achieving the mission. In this regard, it only makes sense that we learn from the one who not only gave us the commission, but showed us how best to implement it amongst men. Sadly, the fallen nature of man, even redeemed man, still wants to take control and give away responsibility. Jesus' discipleship model does exactly the opposite. It calls men to take responsibility and to share ownership. By forming a small group or unit, led by a mature disciple or spiritual war veteran, all dedicated to an approximate 3-year journey with the specific goal of producing more disciple makers, our mission. And so, have you ever wondered what Jesus' discipleship model could achieve if we implemented it today? Well, let's take a look. To begin with, let's examine the discipleship variables and assumptions that underpin the practice and process of disciple making in Jesus' footsteps. The first being a discipleship conversion to disciple maker ratio of 25%, and this is drawn from the 1 in 4 conquer based on Jesus' parable of the 4 soils. The second assumption is that the number of disciples per disciple maker is 4, with 5 in the group, and has been shown to be best practice. The third assumption is the number of years required to produce a disciple maker, and in this case 2.5 years. Jesus took 3 years with 12. And the fourth assumption is that the model is built from a single disciple maker, like you or me. Okay, enough with the theory, let's dive in. As you can see in the graphic alongside, disciple making is a slow process, at least initially. After 10 years of faithful discipleship making, there are only 64 disciples to show for. After 20 years, that number has increased in size to that of a large church gathering, 1,000 people. Remember, we're using the following assumptions just to refresh your memory. A discipleship conversion rate, that is, of 25%. The number of disciples per disciple maker being 4. The number of years required to produce a disciple maker being 2.5. And that the model starts from a single disciple maker like you or I. Let's pick up. Importantly, this number, referring to the 1,000, has been achieved by the first disciple maker starting in year 0, producing 1 more disciple maker every 2.5 years, and those disciple makers doing the same. So by year 20, he has produced, our starter disciple maker, 8 other disciple makers. Only 8, I hear you say. Well, by year 30, he's added another 4 to make it 12. What takes us 30 years took Jesus 3. However, with all the other disciple makers doing the same, every 2.5 years that is, the total number of disciples has now compounded to 16,000. This is after 30 long years of faithful and persevering discipleship. But just wait, because God's discipleship model is only in first gear. From years 30 to 50, the total number of disciples grows in size to that of a medium-sized city, 4 million. By this stage, our first disciple maker is individually responsible for making 20 other disciple makers. That's a 50-year investment in kingdom advancement for only 20 disciple makers. Not exactly headline-grabbing stuff, right? Wrong. Because from years 50 to 60, just 10 years, another 63 million disciples are added. That's the power of compound discipleship. It's hard, unglamorous, and far out of the church limelight or headlines, but it's more effective, more fruitful, and more glorious than any other church-planting, disciple-making model known to man. Critically too, it's a team sport to the very core, not built on personality, gifting, talent, or money, but by simple and faithful obedience and perseverance. A lot of perseverance, one disciple maker at a time. And so perhaps now you have eyes to see and ears to understand why Jesus dedicated himself to only 12 men for his short and intense 3 years of ministry, as well as why truly advancing God's kingdom is hardly as difficult, complicated, or lucrative as the devil would have us all believe. And that explains your spiritual unit. In the next video, we look into the structure.